This recent tragedy in Michigan really brings to the forefront so many questions that we all need to talk about and consider. If you haven't heard, which I think you probably have, there was a school shooting a few days last week in Michigan, and a young man named Ethan Crumbley allegedly shot and killed four of his high school peers. Now, there's many controversies around this happening. One of the big things is that his parents, who are Jennifer and James Crumbley, were arrested, and they have been also charged each with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. Now, when I first heard about this case, I didn't even know there had been a school shooting. This was early last weekend, and I didn't know anything about it. And the first thing I heard was there was a school shooting, and their parents were arrested. And my first thought was, wow, I can't believe that. That doesn't sound right. My first thought was sort of like, that's not right. Because, and the reason my first thought was like that is just because I deal with so many adults and young people who have mental health and or substance abuse issues, whose behaviors vary widely and do all sorts of things. And I understand the powerlessness of parents in a situation like that. So my first thought was like, wow, I can't believe they're doing that. Then you hear more details coming out about the case, and then I'm like, wow, maybe they got that right. Maybe that's exactly what they should have been charged with. And then after watching some more YouTube videos and really thinking about it and digging through, I'm just more mixed up than ever. And the truth of it is, there are no clear answers here. There are no clear solutions, but I do think that this is a topic worth discussing, not just about this case, but about all the families out there who have loved ones suffering from mental illness and or addiction issues, and what rights and responsibilities do families have. Those of you who follow this channel know that we help people that have addictions. And when it comes to addictions, mental health is almost always present as well. And not only do we help people with addiction and mental health issues, but we help entire family systems. And I can't tell you how many countless hundreds, thousands of parents that we've dealt with in our office who are just desperate and confused and don't have any idea about what to do about their kid. Now, when you look at a situation like that happened in Michigan, it's easy to want to put blame somewhere, right? It's immediately when something bad happens, we all want to put blame somewhere because it helps us with our own feelings of powerlessness, and it helps us with our feelings of anger and outrage, to direct all of that negative energy somewhere. And I, like I said before, I don't really know how I feel about these particular parents being charged with that. There's a part of me that feels like they definitely were culpable, and there's a part of me that kind of feels bad for them, even though I know that might not be the most popular opinion. It's always easy looking back on a situation. Hindsight is 2020, and it's easy for us to hear these little snippets of information and think shoulda, coulda, woulda, and that you would have done differently. But sometimes you got to put yourself in the position of the other person and really try hard to think about it from every angle. Because here's what I can tell you about addiction and mental health problems: it's complicated. There are no easy black and white solutions. There are no like bad guys and good guys for the most part. Occasionally, but not usually. There are bad guys and good guys. It's so sad all the way around. But one thing, if you have a loved one, a close loved one, like a parent or a spouse, you probably have a clue about the desperation that you feel and the powerlessness that you feel, and this internal battle between this fight between, trying to protect them, trying to get them help, and then just being exhausted and almost done with it yourself. Now, we don't really know a lot of the backstory about the Ethan Crumbley case yet. We all just have a few little details, which most, if you followed the case at all, you've heard about the text from the mom to the little boy, about the social media post where they had bought him a weapon, and then about where they had called the parents to the school. Now, a lot of people are talking about how the school should be held responsible because they let them go. Now, I'm not a school counselor, but I'm a regular counselor, and the rules as far as what counselors have to do in these types of situations, they vary a little bit from state to state, but overall they're pretty similar. And everyone's saying, well, he drew that picture, they should have put him out of school. But can you really expel someone on the spot for drawing a disturbing picture? I know, like I said, in hindsight, looking back, it's easy for us to say they should have sent him home. And while I agree the picture is alarming and should definitely get attention, which it did, the teacher saw it, the teacher took a picture of it, the teacher sent that picture to administration, the counselors, administrators, they were called in on this, there was a parent meeting, all that kind of stuff. And everyone's like, well, apparently this is what's being told, allegedly. The school had this conference with the parents and said, you have to get him some kind of mental health help within 48 hours. They agreed to do so. The school wanted them to take the kid home, but they didn't want to take the kid home. They wanted him to remain in school. And then shortly after that meeting was when the shooting occurred. Now, like I said, it's easy to look back and be mad at the parents, and it's easy to look back and be mad at the school. Why didn't the school just expel this kid right there on the spot? I don't really think that's grounds. I don't know about the specific rules of that school, but I've been a teacher in a public school. I've worked in a public high school, and I'm a counselor, a trained, licensed counselor. And even if your gut tells you that this is what needs to happen, sometimes you don't have the legal backing to force that to happen, even if you know it in your heart and your gut. Now, you can push the issue, like it appears that they did push the issue, but they probably didn't have grounds to force the kid or expel the kid out of school for the drawing. Now, of course, you're looking back, you're putting the pieces together, because before the drawing, there was the teacher that saw the kid looking up ammunition in school, which the school then tried to call the family about. But even as a counselor, we don't know what the young man said when he was in the office with the counselor or with the administrator or with his parents. We don't know if he said, yeah, I'm thinking about doing this, or if he just flat out completely denied it. Apparently, what's being told in the media is that he said, oh, this drawing is just a drawing that I was working on because I'm designing this video game. So he just outright lied. Now, if someone comes into my office and they tell me something like that, I may feel like they're lying, but I can't force someone into a mental health hospital because I feel like they're lying. If a person comes in and directly tells me this is what I'm thinking about doing, yeah, there's some things that can be done, but most of the time they don't. And in some ways, this boy may have been screaming for help, but in other ways, he may have been intentionally knowing exactly where that line is and where not to step over. And it can feel very frustrating and powerless to be the counselor in the situation, to be the parents in the situation, to be the school. It's just difficult in every direction. Those of you who are here with us live, I definitely want you to feel free to jump in on this conversation. Like I said, there are no right or wrong answers. There are a lot of issues to contemplate when it comes to this case, and I want to know how you feel about it. Any of you watching have a loved one, a close loved one, with a severe mental health and or addiction problem? Are you out there? Are you watching? And it's like, there's this one part of you that knows, that it's dangerous and that it's scary and that bad things can happen. And then there's this other part of you that's like, no, that's like my kid. That's like my spouse. They could never do this. Like I said, these parents, they're looking at the behaviors of this kid and they may be aware that there's struggles. But it's pretty dang hard to make the leap in your head that your 15-year-old kid is about to do something that crazy, unless they have outright said it, right? Even if you've seen a few little like warning signs, if you listen to like any of the true crime stuff like I listen to from the family perspective, they always say, looking back, all the clues were there, but at the time, you just couldn't see them. I'll be really interested to see more that comes out on this case. Let me throw out some situations out there for you to think about and let me know where you stand on this. Let's say you have a kid who has a problem with drugs or alcohol, right? And you let them drive your car to go to the grocery store to pick up some groceries or some things that you need for the house. And they are intoxicated and they crash that car into someone and cause serious harm to themselves or someone else. Should you be held responsible for that? What about if same kind of situation, you have an addicted kid and they have their own car, but it's insured in your name? Should you be held responsible if that addicted kid goes out there and something really bad happens? What about a situation where you're married to someone who has a substance abuse problem and you're not aware of it, but your spouse is selling drugs out of your home? Yeah, that happens. And it happens a lot. A lot of families aren't aware that when their loved one is doing drugs, that they could very well also be selling them, especially young people. A lot of the young people that we see that do drugs sell drugs. And so the chances that if you're doing them, that you sell them or you interact in that process in some way at some point is pretty high, right? Even if it's just you're being the middleman or you're hooking this person up with that person. If that's going on in your home, should you be responsible for it? If it's going on in your home and you don't know about it, what do you think? If it's going on in your home and you kind of know about it, but you don't know everything about it, what do you think? You see, these are complicated situations, right? Hi, Diane. Hi, Carrie. Thank you for joining us. And Karen is here. Let's see what you guys have to say. Now it says all these things remind me of that move. We have to talk about Kevin. You're talking about a movie, Diane? I don't know if I've seen that movie. We have to talk about Kevin. That's interesting. I've not heard of that. Have you guys heard of that? Carrie says, if he was searching for ammo, that obviously proves he has a gun. Yes, you're right, Carrie. And there actually is no question about that because there are a bunch of social media posts that the parents bought the gun for the kid. Now, like I said, just like everything else, I have all these mixed feelings about that, right? On one hand, I'm like, what the heck? Why are you buying your 15-year-old kid a gun? That's my first thought, right? But then right after I have that thought, my thought goes to, we just got back from visiting our family who we live in South Carolina, and our family lives in Tennessee, like way out in the country in Tennessee. And where I'm from in Tennessee, everybody hunts. Probably most 15-year-olds in the town where I'm from have a gun. Probably more do than don't, probably. And I think about my nephews. I have a nephew who's in high school, and he's probably got a bunch of guns because he goes hunting all the time. So then my thought was like, wow, those kids have guns. Like it's just complicated. But then my third thought is, if they don't have a handgun, like a handgun and a hunting gun, that's two different things, right? It's just complicated. And I don't know what the answer to that is. What do you guys think? Like I said, there's so many things that come into play here, right? It's like what parents should be responsible for, what schools should be responsible for, mental health laws, gun control laws. I mean, this is just a complicated mess of a situation. And like I said, if you've got a loved one with a severe mental health or addiction issue, you may not have been placed in this particular situation. You may not have had this before, but you've probably been placed in some dangerous situations, whether you knew it or not. And you probably were in danger of being held responsible for something else, whether you knew it or not. Let's go back to the situation of if you're married and your spouse is doing drugs and you have kids, right? You could get your kids taken away from you, right? If they're selling drugs, what are you responsible for if they're in your home? Like I said, it's really scary stuff. Let's see. James says, I'm in the UK here. We think it's the gun laws you have. Yeah, I think I've heard that before, that in the UK, people, private citizens just don't have guns. And it is a pretty complicated situation with the whole gun control part of it. And like I said, I don't really have super strong opinions about all that. I don't know exactly where I stand, but it's complicated. Kathy says it's a great movie. You must be talking to the We Have to Do Something About Kevin movie. Let's see. Karen says, in Switzerland, if you have a guest in your home and you give them alcohol and they drive home and have an accident, having giving them alcohol, you're held responsible. Wow, I didn't even think about that, but that's so true, right? Like, are you responsible if there's a party at your house and then somebody goes out and does something bad? I've heard of that for sure when it comes to like bartenders, right? If you, in the United States, if you're a bartender and someone's clearly very intoxicated and you continue to serve them alcohol, you can be held responsible. There's a part of me that can understand that. And then there's a part of me that really struggles with that. Now, in my mind, if you're throwing a party at your house for a bunch of teenagers and you're giving them alcohol, I'm a little clearer on how I feel about that. If you're throwing a party at your house and it's adults who are drinking and something bad happens, it's a little more muddy for me, you know? It's just tough. What do you guys think? Do you guys think it's right for these parents to be charged in the specific situation of Ethan Crumbley and his parents, Jennifer and James? What do you think about that specific situation? And what do you think about these other situations in general? Where's the line of responsibility? Karen says, we in Europe do not understand why Americans feel the need to carry guns. Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I can understand why that would be confusing. I'm not, even though I'm from the country, this girl right here is not into hunting, don't care nothing about it, don't want to know nothing about it. If you ask me, I like to tell my family that goes hunting, I say, listen, if I did something really, really bad, like the worst thing you could do to me for punishment would be like wake me up at 5 a.m. or 4, make me go sit out in the cold and hold a gun and kill something. Like that to me be the worst thing could ever happen. So I don't get why people like that, but I do understand that that's a thing, you know. My dad has always had guns. He's target practice. He's, you know, like where I come from, it's a big thing. Me personally, as a person, I don't really get it, but I understand. Carrie says mental health laws needs to change. It definitely makes it difficult to get a loved one help. I'm glad you said that, Carrie, because here's the deal. Before we go rushing to judgment about what these parents should or shouldn't have done, let's take a look at how the mental health system really plays out, right? Let's say the parents did take this seriously, right? And they did try to get their kid help. If they took this kid in for an assessment and the kid wouldn't admit to having these kinds of thoughts, it probably wouldn't have got the proper help, even if the parents had tried to push it, because you can't force someone to get the help. Now, if you're 15 in some states, in a lot of the states at 15, the parents could sign him in. In a lot of states at 16, which is not much older than 15, the kid has to agree to sign themselves into like inpatient treatment or to any kind of counseling, really. And so at 15, the parents could have signed them in. But you know what? It's more complicated than that. Let's say the parents are saying, I'm worried about my kid. There's something wrong. I don't care what he's saying. He needs inpatient treatment. Somebody's got to do something. Guess what's going to happen then if the kid's not saying it? The insurance company is going to come back. I'm promising you right now. And the insurance company is going to come back and say, no, they don't need this level of care. They just need to be in outpatient counseling or maybe an intensive outpatient counseling. Like this isn't a crisis. This isn't life or death. Unless the person is outright saying it, that hunch thing, there's not enough evidence there to prove it. And so even if the parents tried to force it, insurance company is going to deny it. Now, the parents could say, I don't care if the insurance company is going to deny it, I'm going to pay for it. But I can tell you, having worked in an inpatient facility, you're looking at between $5,000 and $10,000 a week to pay for acute care, crisis stabilization, mental health, crisis help like that. Now, most families, they don't have that. I'd say the big majority of families can't do that. And so there are some holes in the system everywhere. And there's this constant balance when it comes to mental health. There's this constant balance between protecting the rights of the individual, protecting the rights of everyone else, right? And it's this balance beam that's hard to figure out exactly where the line is, particularly when it comes to mental health and addiction issues. Most family members that I meet in the situation feel overwhelmed, powerless, desperate. They're begging for help. If you got a person that's over 16 years old, you can beg for help all day long, and you're probably going to get doors shut in your face, one after the other after the other. Unless someone says something as drastic as I'm thinking of, I'm going to hurt myself or I'm going to hurt someone else, the healthcare providers aren't going to talk to you as a family member, right? It's just a lot harder than most people want to think. It's a lot more complicated than most people want to think. It's easy to hear about a situation like this and say, the family should have done this and the school should have done that, right? But then, you hear about a case like Britney Spears and everyone's up in arms, like, free Britney. I can't believe they're trying to control her, right? It's the balance between individual rights and everybody else's rights, and is a gut feeling enough to have someone committed to a hospital? What should the rules be? What do you guys think? If you made the laws, what would it be? All right, let's go back to you guys are jumping in the conversation now. Y'all got a lot to say. I thought y'all might have some things to say on it. Anthony says, I kind of feel like someone should have seen some clues to this happening. I have mental illness and my parents couldn't get a gun because of me, and she was trying to become a police officer. Wow. What state? I think, aren't you from New York, Anthony? I feel like I've seen somewhere in a comment where you put you're from New York. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Is that the case in New York? I know sometimes with teenagers or anybody that's been hospitalized in an inpatient facility, one of the things that we used to have to do when discharging someone from the hospital is call a family member, ask if there were weapons or dangerous things in the home. And if there were, we had to ask the families to at least lock them up. Now, that's not a law. We couldn't force that to happen, but we were required as like the therapist working with these patients to make that phone call and suggest that to the families. But like I said, it was a suggestion. Can't force it. Diggler TC says, the arrest of the parents doesn't sit well with me. It seems like by arresting the parents, they are trying to maybe pose the question, should the parents own guns? Just a thought. Yeah, I think that there's just a lot that comes in here. Should the parents own guns? And I think the bigger question is going to come down to how should those guns have been kept or secured, right? Yeah, it's gonna bring up a lot of difficult discussions. Rainbow says, the difference is that I took my role as a gatekeeper seriously, ripping my kids out of the car when I thought their dad could be drinking. These parents don't come across like they cared. It's hard. Like some of the things, Rainbow Zebra, that I've heard make me think that, like when you hear the text, the one little text that the mom sent back to the kid, which was, hey, I'm not mad at you. You just have to learn not to get caught. When you hear something like that, it definitely is like, what the heck? That's like, serious, woman, you need to be taking that seriously. But again, you can take one little comment out of context with everything else and all the other conversations that have been had, and it's easy to put some judgment on it. And we don't know yet. Hopefully some of that will come to light and we'll have a better, more clear picture of exactly the way that worked. I also heard that as soon as the news came out that there was a shooting happening at the school, that the dad picked up the phone and called the police and said, hey, there's shooting happening at the school. I think it might be my kid. And so obviously, as soon as the father thought that there was a problem, he tried to make it stop. I understand that it was too late, but to me, that's a clue that they didn't think that that's what was going to happen, right? And it's easy for us to look at and be like, well, how could you not have seen it? But that's hindsight. I'm telling you what, if you had a teenager out there with an addiction or mental health problem, you've seen some crazy drawings. You've seen some odd behavior, but I bet you didn't think they're about to go do that, right? It's just so hard for us to make that leap in our head, even as a counselor. Now, as a counselor, sometimes it doesn't happen often, but occasionally I'll get someone in my office and who knows if it's actual or not, but you just have that feeling like, no, I do not like this. This does not sit good with me. This is a bad situation. When I hear about this kid, my guess is he's given off the vibe pretty strong. Like before last week, like before the teacher found him looking up ammunition, like before the drawing. My feeling is this kid was giving out some serious signals, which is why as soon as the teachers saw those things, they jumped to those actions. My guess is there's a long story that happened leading up to this right here, and that there was a lot more signals that could have been picked up. Tina says, we need more information about the case, but it does seem like the parents' bad choices contributed to the shooting. Yeah, I'm with you. And I did hear today, which was the first time I heard, Tina, on one of the situations, is that the kid was a hunter and he did love hunting. So in my mind, I was like, okay, well, that makes a little bit more sense why the kid would have a gun. But then I'm like, but a handgun? It's like I kind of go over, and then I'm like, but, it's just like, I don't know. Kayla says, I'm late. Just came in when I heard something about an image. Guns with kids should be supervised. In my opinion, if there's an indication of a threat, guns should be taken away. The guns were guns supplied by them. Yes, the gun was definitely supplied by them. There was posts where the kid posted on social media showing the weapon, bragging about the weapon. And there were posts on the parents' social media where the parents talked about the fact, look what we just got our kid for Christmas. Look at his new present. He's so happy about it. He loves it, whatever, so there's definitely a lot of evidence as to that fact. There is some question as to whether how they secured the gun. Someone was saying that the dad or something had it in like one of his drawers. Then there's somebody else saying, no, that's not the case. I don't know, but clearly the kid had it. He had it in his backpack that day, had it in his backpack when he drew that drawing, had it in his backpack when he's sitting in the office talking with his parents and his principal and his counselor, walked into the bathroom 10 minutes later, and then all this happens, right? And you may think it's silly, but you see a drawing, like I said, we're looking at this, we're thinking, you see that drawing, you got to know something bad's going to happen, but you don't automatically jump to. You may not even think to say, open your backpack. I know all of us want to say, looking back, oh, I would have searched that kid's backpack. I would have done this. I'm telling you, it's the hindsight thing. Let's think about it rationally and clearly. I was hearing one of the YouTubers I like, who's a lawyer. I think her channel is called Lawyer Chick. I really like her. I listen to her a lot. And I thought she made a really good point, because she talked about in high school where she grew up, there were metal detectors. Now, to me, that is one pretty clear and easy step that could be taken to help reduce these risks. That's probably a little clearer and a little easier than some of these other complicated issues like mental health help, and when you can commit someone to treatment, and when you can expel someone to school and that kind of thing. Is anyone watching out there that's works in a high school setting right now? What are the rules, right? If you see a kid drew a picture like that, could the school have forced him home? Could they have? I don't know. Like, I've heard a lot of people talking, why didn't the school just force it even if the parents didn't want to take them? I'm like, yeah, but can you do that because you saw a crazy drawing, right? I don't think in most schools that's the case, even if you want to. Maybe it is. I don't know. Sarah says, the fact that there was a text from his mom saying, Ethan, don't do it, while his parents also shrugged off the counselors wanting them to take him out of school that day is wild. It's hard to defend. Yeah. I think immediately when they heard about it, immediately they knew that was their kid. Whether or not they really thought 10 minutes before that their kid could ever done something like that, that's a different question. Probably not. Karen says, I think that if you own a weapon and it is later discovered that because it was not locked away securely in the home, it was used to kill someone, you should absolutely be held responsible. I think that, that's pretty clear, right? Like having, if you're going to have a weapon, keeping it securely, I think it's kind of a given, right? James says, what are your thoughts on Rittenhouse? I don't know, James. Tell me what your thoughts about that are. Let's hear what you think. The gun wasn't even stored in a locked cabinet in the text. I hope they get prison time. It will make people think twice. It might push the mental health system to change. One thing I think they can do, Rainbow Zebra, is do a better job of educating parents about what warning signs to look for, because we all think, oh, my kid would never do that. Even if the parents knew maybe this kid was depressed, even if this kid, they knew this kid hated school or something like that, it's a big leap to make in your head that something like that could happen. Hey, Matt from the UK. Big KM says, how old was kid? 15 is my understanding. Acadia says, there are so many loopholes in mental health care where insurance and kids telling the truth, etc. They don't want to look bad. We can't judge what we haven't experienced or know. I'm with you, Acadia. I'm with you 100% on that. And that's coming from someone. I have worked on an adolescent unit for many years of a crisis stabilization hospital for teenagers having thoughts like harming themselves and someone else. Like, I worked in a system where these kids actually went, and I can tell you like where the limitations are. If they're not going to tell you the truth and you can't find the evidence, you can't force someone to stay. You can't force insurance to pay for it. And even if you can, they're probably only going to stay there for about a week in that level or kind of care. It's complicated. Elizabeth says, it's a quandary. I know enough to know I really shouldn't put forth an opinion. There are so many unknowns and moving parts. Thanks, Amber. Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I have strong feelings, and then like 30 seconds later, I have strong feelings on the other side, and then more strong feelings. It's just hard. I'm kind of all over the place with it. Kayla says, some states allow people to have guns if a person technically agrees to treatment, even if it is coerced, even if they are a threat to others. Yes, that's right. If you are in this state, South Carolina, if you are committed to the hospital, like a judge signed and said you had to get inpatient mental health care, then you cannot own a gun, right? But what Kayla is saying is, let's say you're having bad thoughts like that, but you check yourself into the hospital, and when it's that kind of situation, there is no rule that says you cannot own weapons after that. It's like, even if there's a rule that you can't, what's the rule? Let's say you live with someone else. Can they not? You see what I'm saying? Like, there's just no easy solutions here. Let's see. Learning to count. My husband isn't willing to stop drinking and driving. I'm worried about what will happen to the rest of the family if he gets in a worst case scenario, kill someone. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. It's kind of like, it's happening. It's easy for everyone else to think that the family can just put the brakes on all this. But I every single day, I watch families try to put the brakes on it, and they can't, no matter how hard they try, no matter what they do, right? It's easy to judge. Isn't there always a build-up phase that would have seen it coming? I cannot own a gun because I've had issues and don't want to ever hurt anyone. Yeah, there usually is. Usually is the build-up phase, but it's that sort of hindsight 2020 thing. Let's see. Anthony says, yes, he is from Buffalo, New York. James says, I think it's self-defense. K-Con says, I don't know what the topic is for today, but my attic had a big heart issue taken care of. but still doesn't leave his substance. You see what I mean? From the family perspective, it's like you have limited control over another person that has substance abuse problem. Let me give you another example. This is another really complicated one. I've treated, over my professional career, I've treated a lot of people that have bipolar disorder, like real deal bipolar disorder, like get psychotic type of bipolar disorder. And when a person has bipolar disorder and they get psychotic, they can be very dangerous to themselves and to the people around them. And the family and the doctors and the counselors may all understand that this person needs to take their medication. But the person has a right to refuse to take the medication to treat the bipolar disorder. I've seen that more times than I can even count. So even if you know this person does not take this medicine, they're likely to have an episode of psychosis, which then is very likely to make them a danger to themselves or others. Do you guys think it should be where medicines can be forced on people or not forced on people? What do you think? It's complicated. And if you're going to allow it for that, how do you figure out where the line in the sand is and say, well, you can make someone who's bipolar take their medicine if they've had psychosis, but not someone who's depressed? It is tough. Kayla says the parents should just take him home and reassess, even if just for a day. I agree, Kayla, because I wish the parents would have taken him home because maybe it would have given some time to thought. Maybe he could have got some help. But then there's another part of me that says maybe they took him home for a day, but next week it came back, right? Like, let's say even in the best case scenario, they got him admitted to an inpatient facility and he got treatment for a week. And he got better. Let's say he came out and he decided he doesn't want to take his medicine or he doesn't want to go to his aftercare, and he got himself right back in the same situation. It's just hard. Moms know their kids. We may not know the facts or the details, but we know there's a problem, and it's our job to figure it out. It's our job to protect them. Protection comes in many forms. I agree. I definitely agree with the first part of what you're saying about moms know there's a kid. Moms know their kids, and they know there's a problem. I 1,000% agree. But even when you know there's a problem, you may not be being honest with yourself about the extent of that problem, right? I think these parents probably did know this kid was depressed or something like that, right? But they may not. They may have known. There could be evidence to come out that they knew he was going to do that day. It's possible, but my guess is probably not, that they were in some level of denial about it. Naza says, thank you so much, Amber. I've learned a lot from you. My son's 29. I started drug addiction around 24. Hey, thank you for your positive encouragement, and I'm really sorry in your situation. It's interesting that it didn't start till the age of 24. Believe it or not, that's a little bit late in the world of addiction to get started. But it's actually good, too, because it means that by the time they're 24, they had a lot of good brain development, psychological development, and they have a lot more resources in order to be able to beat the addiction. Diggler says, when I was a young kid at school, me and my friends would draw pictures of people shooting each other with guns in war, cops and robbers. Nowadays, they would send a kid who drew that to a psychologist. Right. That's what I mean, Diggler, when I say it's complicated. It's like, yeah, we hear about this Ethan kid. He drew this picture, and we're like, oh my gosh, they should have locked him up in the psych hospital, right? But then you hear situations like this, and another little boy can do it, and you can be like, oh, that's just boys, right? It's just easy to kind of blow it off. And there's no, well, my gut says this one is different. Can you lock someone up because your gut says this one's different? I mean, sometimes I kind of think you should be able to, but you really can't, whether it's a legal restriction, a mental health restriction, a school restriction. It's easy to say like, well, this kid was different than that kid. But let's say you did do that to that kid, then you're going to have some families coming after you suing you saying, well, you expelled my kid for it, but you didn't expel Diggler over there for it. It gets messy. Let's see. The parents may think there was empty threats and drawings weren't with intent. That's what the text may have meant. Yeah, I kind of agree with you. That's my guess anyways. They had a duty to be responsible gun owners. They weren't. I agree with you. It's kind of like they did have a duty to be responsible gun owners. And so part of me, like I said, I'm like, why did they have that locked up? And the other part of me is like, well, they bought it for the kid. So they weren't trying to keep the kid from getting access to it at all. Like, it was, here you go, happy Christmas or whatever, it's yours. And Naza says, I ask God every day to help those who are addicted in their families. I'm with you. James says, I have an appointment with a mental health team on Wednesday. It's making me anxious. Is it worth it? Thanks. Sure, James. Like, what seems scary about having that appointment? I think people sometimes get it in their head like it's this big scary thing, but it's usually not that nearly as intimidating or scary as people might think, as far as getting help and treatment for mental health. Mimi says, moms know their kids until they don't. Right. There's this level of like denial that we are all subject to, right? Like, it can happen to any of us. On one hand, we know them better than they know themselves, and on the other hand, we don't know them at all, right? You can be on both sides of that fence at the same time. Tina says the boy should have gone to an in-school suspension to talk to a behavior specialist and separated from other students. Yeah, that's definitely one of the things that could happen, right? They could have sent him, but a lot of times in school suspension in most schools is you're in there with a bunch of other kids. So it could have been put in a different classroom, but I don't know that would have stopped it either. Karen says, love your channel. So sorry I'm not busy in a long time. Hey, glad you're here today. Jackie says, how political is this with regards to the parents? It's another good question. So I think what you're saying, Jackie, is like, is this a political move, like on the prosecution? Are they doing it to make a political statement? I think on some level it is political. I think on some level it is about making a statement, because we all want to pinpoint where the problem is when things like this happen. And we all want to think, okay, here's the problem and here's how we're going to fix it. We're going to put metal detectors in. We're going to make mandatory this. We're going to make this law. But when it comes to mental health and addiction, it's just like the parents that we see or the spouses that we see who are trying to externally control a loved one's addiction. Yeah, they can make this rule and this mandate and that mandate, and rarely does it ever fix anything, right? It's tough. Sarah says, why is it okay to buy your kids a gun but illegal to buy them alcohol? We'll put that up there and say amen to that. Amen to that. I totally agree. The reason, just so y'all know, reason why you can't drink till you're 21, because I hear this argument, and I fought this argument when I was younger myself. Why can you go to war at 18 but you can't drink till you're 21? Reason you can't drink till you're 21 is because your brain isn't developed enough to handle alcohol until you're 21. Your frontal lobe's still developing. So I think when you think about it from that biological reasoning, I kind of agree with Sarah on some level about the ability to own a gun versus the ability to own alcohol, right? It's dangerous. It's dangerous for young people because they don't have the critical thinking skills of an adult. They can't weigh the pros and cons the same way that you or I do. And if you talk about a depressed kid, you're even more significantly impacted, and they have less ability to think it through, to think rationally, to weigh the pros and cons. The parents bought him the gun for Christmas, so I highly doubt the dad was keeping it locked or whatever. Yeah, that's kind of my thinking about it. That's just my guess. That's just my opinion. We don't know for sure the facts yet, but that's kind of my first hunch on it. Karen says, why is your channel called Put the Shovel Down? Great question. That's actually a recovery saying, Karen. The recovery saying is you hit your bottom when you put the shovel down, which means you don't have to lose everything. You don't have to have horrible, terrible things happen to you. You can decide you're done with an addiction at any point. You hit your bottom when you put your shovel down. So that's why the channel is called Put Your Shovel Down. I'm glad you asked that. Thank you, everyone who showed up for this conversation and discussion live. I know it's a tough one, but I appreciate all your opinions and thoughts. If you're catching this on the replay, please still jump in there with your thoughts and opinions, because it's something we all need to think about. We all need to discuss. It's the only way we're ever going to get anywhere. It's the only way we're going to get actually make some kind of progress in trying to help stop these things from happening. I'll see you guys Thursday at 1 for our next live.